Welcome back, traveler. The story I'm about to tell you is a grim one indeed. A tale of treachery, betrayal, and slaughter. A war that shattered both mighty empires. A war that still lingers in the hearts of every Dawi. This is the tale of the War of Vengeance. When the ancestor gods left, it was up to the son of Grungni and first High King, Snorri Whitebeard, to rule the everlasting realm. The most significant thing that happened during his rule was the friendship that was birthed between elf and dwarf. The Phoenix King at the time, Bel-Shanaar, alongside his trusted diplomat Malekith, became lifelong friends of Snorri Whitebeard. It's said that Malekith and Snorri grew a brotherly liking to each other. Aye, this was the height of both empires. The High Elves colonized most of the Old World. The High Elven colonies stretched from the soon-to-be lands of Sigmar down to the woods of Athaloran, while the Dawi still held a firm grip over the world's edge mountains. It was a great era. Oh, it's hard to believe now, but many at the time said this alliance would last for eternity. How foolish we were. Snorri Whitebeard would die peacefully in his deathbed. He was accompanied by his council of Longbeards and his dearest friend, Malekith. As Snorri Whitebeard drew his last breath, both he and Malekith swore an oath that the kinship between the two races would never be broken. Little did we know that a darkness was coiling around Malekith's heart. A darkness that would send the two empires asunder. Unbeknownst to us at the time, Malekith always had a deep resentment to Bel-Shanaar. For you see, traveler, Malekith was the son of Anarion, the very first Phoenix King who partook with the Dwarfs against the first scourge of chaos. Many, including Malekith, thought that he would take up his father's place and become the next king. However, the Phoenix Council sensed that Malekith would not be a good king, and instead elected Bel-Shanaar. Malekith agreed begrudgingly to serve under his new king as ambassador. Back in Ulthuan, chaos loomed its head. This time, it was much more subtle. Pleasure cults started to spread like a cancer throughout the mainland. These pleasure cults swore secret allegiance to Slaanesh, the god of excess and pleasure. Most of these cults were ran by Malekith's own mother, Morathi. Though he was shocked at first, he saw potential in these cults, and he and his mother began to scheme in the shadows. One of these plans came to fruition as Malekith accused Bel-Shanaar as being a member of these pleasure cults. Before Bel-Shanaar could disprove this obvious lie, Malekith poisoned him. To summarize it quickly, this treachery caused a massive civil war and pushed Malekith further down a dark path of depravity and madness. He was eventually expelled from Ulthuan to the northern colonies of Naggaroth, where he would then rule the new race of Dark Elves. The damage was done. During the Civil War, 3 Phoenix Kings were slain. In desperation, the Phoenix Council elected Caledor II to take up the throne. Caledor, however, was a rash, egotistical, and foolish leader. He would be a great asset for Malekith's most destructive scheme, a plot to sour the relationship between the dwarf and elven kingdoms. So he sent out his Druki followers, disguised as high elf warriors, to raid dwarf caravans. News quickly spread to the capital of Karaz-a-Karak that the high elf soldiers were attacking dwarf caravans. Current High King Gotrek Starbreaker, ignorant of the situation that transpired in Uthwan, was dumbfounded by this act of aggression. Not wanting to act rashly, he sent out an ambassador to the capital to speak to Caledor II. Starbreaker's terms were clear to Caledor. Either they pay a healthy sum for these unjustly attacks, or explain themselves of what's going on. Caledor was furious. Instead of explaining that this was not his treachery, his arrogance and ego blindsided his decision. He ordered that the dwarf diplomat to be restrained. Then he did the unthinkable. In front of his entire court, he shaved the diplomat's beard. The ambassador was disgraced and shortly became a slayer. This confirmed our suspicion that our allies betrayed us, and there could only be one answer to satisfy this grudge: war. Gotrek Starbreaker raised a throng of the ages. The Longbeards of Karaz-a-Karak, the Hammerers of Karak-Azul, and the Slayers of Karak-Kadrin answered the High King's call to march against the elven colonies and expel them from the old world. The first siege of Tor-Elis began. The reason the High King chose this city was because it was one of the largest trading cities of all the elf colonies. King Gotrek Starbreaker swore that if the city was not plundered, he would shave his head. Though he had an upper hand, Caledor II sent his reinforcements by his vast armada, bringing the siege to a standstill, and then pushing us back to our original territory. The war dragged on, and it slowly became less of a war of conquest, but a war of attrition. Both sides started to care less about gaining the upper hand, and just seeing how many creative ways they could spite each other. As an example, we would burn many of the virgin forests. The Elgi, naturally, would become outraged, and they would try to spite us by poisoning our underground water systems that were used for irrigation and drinking. Many would perish as a result. And this conflict, it would drag on, and on, and on. For 400 years. Gotrek Starbreaker received news that filled his heart with sorrow. His son, Snorri Halfhand, was butchered by none other than Caledor II. This was a mighty blow. We lost so many sons, so many innocent lives were destroyed, and now his own son died by the hands of that egotistical Wazak. Gotrek Starbreaker, though his heart broken, was not a weak king. The despair for his people, for his son, reinvigorated a burning furnace of hatred. He was gonna settle this grudge once and for all. That bastard Caledor will pay in blood. The Dawi, for the last time, marched on Tor-Elis. Havoc reigned on the colony. Gottric Starbreaker cleaved through his foes and met gaze with Calador II. The runes of Grimnir's axe burned bright, just as his hatred for the Phoenix King. A mighty duel took place as king fought king, axe struck sword. Calador was a mighty duelist and fought with elegance. He danced and slashed with his sword at the dwarfish High King, while Starbreaker, his will as mighty as steel, fought like a mad ox, trying to cleave the Phoenix King open. The duel lasted for days, until finally Calador was left exposed, creating a perfect opportunity for the High King to sever his head, dyeing his beard an axe crimson. Bruised and exhausted, Gottric Starbreaker glared at the lifeless corpse of his foe. He walked slowly towards the head of Calador II, the Phoenix King's eyes forever frozen in disbelief. Starbreaker took the Phoenix crown and held it in the air victorious. A grudge put to rat. Victory was hard won, but there was no celebration. Far too many were slain, for a war that was all about wounded pride. The High Elves retreated from the old world, and some of the colonies of Athaloran rebelled, creating the Wood Elves. Our fate was not much better, for our greatest enemies were lurking in the deep caves of our holds. Things were going to get worse. Much, much worse.